The Arc the Lad series does not get enough love these days, though it was quite popular in Japan and never really took off internationally. I'm thankful we even got these games localized at all. We got them 7 years after the release of the first Arc the Lad game in 1995 as a collection of the Arc the Lad trilogy in 2002 for the PS1. Now, this was at the point where the next generation was in full swing, and the JRPG boom in the West from Final Fantasy VII had died down to some degree. So these games were doomed to be niche, but those that played them would find something amazing, as this series, and especially the one I'm covering today, Arc the Lad 2, are some of the best RPGs I've ever played. The developers of the Arc the Lad series, G-Craft, exclusively made tactical RPGs in their time as an independent studio, starting with Front Mission on the Super Nintendo. The quality and success of that game was recognized by Sony, so they sought them out to make the first tactical RPG for the PS1, which would in turn become Arc the Lad. This would be a monumental project for its time in 1995, using full CG cutscenes, detailed and smooth pixel art animations, and an orchestral soundtrack in a time when barely any games were doing one of those things. However, as you might imagine, their ambitions were initially too grand, as the plot of the first two Arc the Lad games were originally meant to be one longer game. They had to scale back the first game to get it out in time, but in a way I'm glad they did this because it gave them time to really refine the sequel and make Arc the Lad 2 more ambitious and unique. The unique atmosphere and tone of Arc the Lad 2 will catch your eye immediately, as the dark places the story goes and the modern dilapidated city environments make for a great twist on your typical fantasy JRPG. It's reminiscent of Final Fantasy VII in that regard, but you might be surprised that this game actually came out before that, and it's highly likely Square Enix was actually looking to this studio for inspiration, as they acquired them in 1997, not too long after Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy Tactics were released. Much like Final Fantasy VII, the story is a grand fun adventure, yet it does not shy away from being dark and handling serious topics. Let's take a look at the opening hours of the game and see what it does that makes it have this unique atmosphere. A great example of this is the opening scene. We open on the main character's hometown being slaughtered by one of the main villainous forces in the Arc the Lad games, the Romalian Empire. The main character here, named Elk? Elk tries to defend his fellow people using his fire magic, but he fails to fully stop the destruction of his hometown. You then awake to find this was a dream flashback, and that Elk, who is now a young adult, currently works as a hunter, which in this world is basically a mercenary, but with more heroic connotations. This is a great storytelling decision, as instead of your adventure being kicked off by you being a chosen one like in the first Arc the Lad game and many other JRPGs, the events of the story first start to unfold because of the decisions you choose to make as a hunter, simply taking jobs. This makes progressing the story feel like your decision and not something you're being forced into due to some prophecy. Before you go on your first job though, you may walk around town and hear a few things about the terrorist Ark, or people's opinions on the oppressive forces in the world like the Cabal or the Romalian Empire, or the conditions that they're living in. If you played the first game before playing this one, you might be confused to hear people refer to Ark as a terrorist, as you played as him and know him as someone who saved the world. This is a really smart decision to mess with players' expectations and make them want to talk to more NPCs to learn more about what's going on. I feel that often RPGs misuse all the NPCs they have. Usually they're so boring that I stop talking to any after a while, but I really recommend talking to NPCs in this game, as you're often rewarded for taking the time to do so, with either bits and pieces of the story to come that will pique your interest, or with weird, funny moments. After you've taken in the world for a bit, you set out on your first job as a hunter. Your mission is to stop someone who's attempting to shut down the airship port. In doing this, you end up running into the next main character, Lietza. Your meeting is quite mysterious, but it's quite evident that she's on the run, and as you press on to take down the villain, she joins you in taking him down. After you have him on the ropes, he starts to panic as the group that he's a part of are approaching and will not accept his failure. These mobsters, known as the Cabal, are actually pretty hilarious because the localization team went to the extra effort to give them a stereotypical Italian mobster accent, and it's something.
All this from a slice of gabagool.
Now, even though the Cabal are kind of funny, they're still an intimidating villain, as after they kill their own member, they then point their guns at you. Lietza is hit as you escape, and now you have to take her to your friend Shu's house to hide and heal up. As Lietza gets better, You, her, and Shu head out on more hunter missions, which eventually entangles you in a situation where you're in the middle of a big ceremony held by the Cabal's leader at the feet of what they call the goddess statue. Until, out of nowhere, Ark from the first Ark the Lad game comes in and blows up the statue. This clues you into why you heard them referred to as a terrorist, but if you played the first game, you know there has to be more to this story, and it really makes you want to know what's going on. Elk also really wants to know what's going on because the ship Ark arrived in is the same ship that arrived in Elk's village years ago and slaughtered everyone there. So you chase after them, and this gets the main plot of the game rolling as you try to uncover the mysteries of what is going on with what happened in Elk's past, what's going on with Ark, and what the Cabal and the Romalian Empire are plotting. I don't want to spoil much more, but I wanted to lay out the opening in some detail to show you how this game sets up mystery and intrigue to get you immersed in the story really quickly. Trust me though, these spoilers are quite minor as the game has many more stories and mysteries that I didn't even begin to introduce here that are also great. The story is definitely not afraid to go to darker places compared to the first Ark the Lad game, and even frames the former game's main character as a villain early on, which is a bold and interesting choice. These well-executed storytelling decisions, combined with the great naturalistic writing, the unique setting and atmosphere, and great pacing, makes the story add a lot to this game. Honestly though, the game would still be good even without the solid story, as all the other elements of the game were also very well executed. In particular, the soundtrack does a lot to add to this game. Its best and most distinct moments are its more jazzy tracks, as they set the perfect tone for the city environment. The music was composed by Masahiro Ando and Hirotaka Izumi, both members of the jazz fusion band named T-Square, so it makes sense why they brought this jazzy influence here. There are also some striking ambient moments in the soundtrack as well that elevate certain story beats and help make some characters' introductions quite intriguing. Unfortunately, the music for battles or intense set pieces tend to be the more generic RPG type of music, but they're still solid tracks nonetheless. The soundtrack as a whole does a great job of setting the mood for the incredibly stunning pixel art you'll be seeing in this game. They went above and beyond the industry standard at the time, especially in the environmental detail. There is even a day and night cycle for towns, and considering most tactical RPGs have next to no world to explore due to gameplay taking up much more focus and development, what they've pulled off here is incredible, and it's truly unique to Ark the Lad 2. Not only is the pixel art incredible, the detail in the animations adds so much expression in and out of battle. While exploring the world, the characters are lively and expressive. NPCs have subtle flourishes of movement, and cutscenes are dense with unique pixel art and animations. These touches really bring life to the characters, and you'll definitely feel this in battles as well. The game gives all its attack animations satisfying weight, and some of the spells are really impressive. These battles take place as pretty standard grid-based tactical RPG gameplay, though the incredible animation and pixel art definitely adds a lot of the fun to the battles. The tactics are not as complex as some other TRPGs, but the combat mechanics are really solid, and the variety of characters you get to control is really good, as each one is super unique. The amount of enemy variety is also good, though sometimes it is quite difficult to guess what kind of abilities they have the first time you encounter many enemies. It's not always obvious what kind of range and abilities they have, so you might have some trial and error when trying to strategize against them. When defeating these enemies, you'll obviously gain XP, but you might also notice yourself gaining XP for more than just base stat level ups, because not only do character levels go up, your equipment does as well. The more you use a specific weapon or piece of equipment, the more it levels up, and the more you use certain spells, the more that category of spells levels up. A nice touch to this system is that using different weapon types will also be the key to unlocking different abilities and spells. This is great because it incentivizes you to switch to weapons which you haven't leveled up yet. Then, once you overcome this temporary disadvantage, you're rewarded with new abilities that only add more depth to the strategies at your disposal. This makes it feel like you have a part in the way your character gets stronger, and to me, this is a real strength for any RPG, as adding depth to the leveling system is always a plus. However, I think the complexity of the combat might not actually be the main focus here, even though there is a good amount of it and the game can be quite challenging if you try to blaze through it. I think the pacing and moment-to-moment satisfaction of the gameplay was more important to the developers than having the most strategically complicated battle system. It's clear they tried to streamline the combat system more so than many tactical RPGs. This focuses the game on pushing the adventure along and having you learn through battle rather than too many tutorials. For one example of how they streamlined the combat, there's really no use of elevation or terrain effects in maps, or we can also look at how the equipment of characters has been simplified. By only allowing 3 items to be equipped and not needing you to change that equipment often, you spend less time within menus and more time thinking about more immediate battle strategies. However, the leveling of equipment plus fun side effects of equipable items, as well as the ability to combine items at the blacksmith, can add depth here if you really want to explore it. Little quality of life touches also keep the combat flowing well, such as not having to bring up any kind of menu to do a regular attack. If you're in range of your enemy, just press X. Many TRPGs with more complicated battle systems can sometimes have you pressing far too many buttons to just move, attack, and end your turn. This may seem small, but you'll be doing this hundreds or thousands of times throughout the game, so it really adds up and can affect the pacing of battles. Due to this focus on pacing and ease of approach to tactical RPG combat, there's definitely less customization here than more gameplay-focused tactical RPGs. However, in my opinion, the reason you would want to play this game instead of those is the fun adventure, the beautiful explorable world, and the unique atmosphere. Arc the Lad 2 is a game I went into fully expecting a solid experience, but leaning towards the generic norm, as that's what I got with the first game. Thankfully, I was very pleasantly surprised to find this game took a totally different direction as a sequel, and it's all the better for it. The surprisingly compelling, well-paced story, solid gameplay mechanics, great soundtrack, and beautiful art and animations all come together to make a great game that deserves more appreciation. Let me know your thoughts on the Arc the Lad games in the comments, and whether I should play other games in the series, as I have so far only played the first 2. Thanks so much for watching, and have a good day. There's an anime adaptation of this game, and it's actually pretty decent. Because it adapts the story of Arc the Lad 2 pretty faithfully, the story is solid. The character designs and artwork is actually really good here, but it's clear they didn't have the biggest budget for this one, as cut corners in the animation are everywhere. That didn't stop me from getting a kick out of watching a few episodes though, and I'd recommend checking it out if you're a fan of the game.